Okay, so we are in the final week of our series, At the Table. And one thing that we have learned during the series is that a lot of this Christianity, learning how to follow Jesus, did not come from behind a pulpit or at an altar or even in a book. It took shape around a table with real flesh and blood people. So here are my people. This is my family. I know some of you don't know me well or at all, and that's fine. But my two daughters are there with their two boyfriends, my husband, my mom, and then our international student who just went back to France a couple of weeks ago. And I love them with everything that I have, even when they convinced me to buy a bridge of sushi in the middle of the week. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? But we have talked about how one of the most controversial parts of Jesus' ministry was who he sat at tables with. And sometimes even more than the food that they had or the people that were there, but also about the stories that get told around those tables with the people that you're with. Because whether you're planning a big elaborate party or a Pinterest-worthy birthday party, or whether you have 5 minutes and a paper cup and you're out here in the lobby around one of our round tables, those stories, that life, those conversations that you have are so important. So hear me when I say, like, they don't have to be elaborate, you know, the basic, nothing fancy has to happen around a table. It can be very ordinary. It's not insignificant, though. But we want to use tables as kind of an inroads to leading people to seeing God's kingdom in a new and exciting way, right? Like, we don't want to sit around tables just to be like, yeah, I have friends. We were there at the table together. No, that's not what they're about for us. And the guest list is important, okay? So you're not at your uncle's wedding where you're forced to sit at the kids' table. You get to choose your own guest list because guess what? You're an adult and you can do whatever you want. And that is wild to me, okay? Sometimes when I think about that. But anyways, you get to choose the guest list. So as we start, have you ever been someplace where you have had to do icebreakers? Because they stress me out, and often I hate them because I cannot think on my feet fast enough to decide what the answer should be. But I threw one up on our community Facebook page last week that is probably one of the most common, and it's this. If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be? Right? And without fail, there's no wrong answer, obviously, because you can have dinner with whoever you want. But without fail, someone always says Jesus, right? And for me, that is not the answer, because he would make me super uncomfy, okay? He's gonna ask me lots of questions about myself, and I just do not think that I would be here for that. But that's why my answer would be like Reese Witherspoon. Somebody who is fun. She's also a mom who's created a brand for herself. She has a book club. We would talk a lot about books, but I also think like it's fascinating people with celebrity status who seem like, you know, just ordinary, normal people. I'm fascinated by that. Jesus, in my opinion, is a dangerous answer. And I don't think that he would be grilling me the whole time, questioning my life choices and stuff. I mean, he probably would a little bit. And I think we'd probably have really great wine, but there's just too much anxiety, like, in all of this to have Jesus at my dinner table. But as we start, we're in Luke 14 today, and Jesus is actually at a table having a meal with a Pharisee, and not just any normal Pharisee, like the leader of the Pharisees, okay? So this is a big deal. But Jesus kind of looks around at how the table is arranged, and he's like, hey guys, why aren't there any like needy or poor people here? Like, where are they? And I'm sure the guests at the table were all like, do not make eye contact because that just got real awkward. Like, I don't know what to say. Because if you think of table fellowship back in the Greco-Roman days, it was set up differently than how we have it now, or how we should have it now at least, because the table was central to kind of maintaining this social status, right? Their class, but it was all about looking good and moving up at the table, because in these ancient days, the tables were set up like in a U shape, kind of like picture a wedding maybe that you've been at where, the bride and groom are at the head table here, and maybe they're, bridal party is on the outside, but then you have like their closest family and friends. Then you have maybe the family that they don't know so well, then your coworkers. It kind of like goes out. The hierarchy kind of, you can tell it at a wedding, right? Like it just kind of goes out, which is fine. But you could never jump from the far seats, right, to up by where the head people were. That's just not how it worked. But the only way that you could kind of slowly move your way up to the head of the table was to invite someone maybe more powerful than you, maybe more privileged than you. So that way you could continue to move up, because then they would owe you, right? And so you would eventually move on up because where you were seated was your status. But what about in Jewish culture? Because Greco-Roman is kind of this big, wide picture, and then in Jewish culture, they were still a part of that, but they were a smaller section trying to do their own things, maybe a different way. But instead of not inviting people based on like their class or their social status, they were excluding people based on their, were they sick? Were they unclean in some way? Were they immoral? Their invites just mysteriously got lost in the mail, It was like, oh, sorry. But the table that Jesus was invited to that day was symbolized exclusion and self-advancement. So let me ask you this question. Do we still do that some today? Do we invite people based on their ability to contribute to what we want them to do or what we need them to do for us? Maybe so they can get us in good standing with someone else, or maybe so that they would have to reciprocate a favor for us another time. I can't tell you the number of times that I have reached out to someone wanting to get a meal or coffee, and they're like, what do you want? And I'm like, caffeine and nourishment, but I don't know what you're looking for. Because somebody is always thinking, and maybe it's because we work at the church, I don't know, but that we want them to do something or that we have a hidden agenda. We couldn't possibly just want to go get some caffeine with you. We do, okay? Just for the record, if I reach out, that's probably what I'm wanting. But I also have been in those shoes. There have been many times where people have reached out to me wanting to grab a meal or something, and I'm like, but why? Because I'm weird, and anytime I think somebody wants to be my friend, I'm like, I don't understand. You're going to have to explain, because it doesn't make any sense. But when Jesus looks around and he sees how these guests are seated, he starts imparting a little wisdom. He wants to drop a little knowledge. He wants to teach them a little something. So he starts out this way. He says, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. Can you even imagine? You have taken a seat, you're all comfy, and then an usher comes by and tells you that you have to move to the balcony. I'd be like, that's okay, I'm just gonna move all the way out the door back to my house, make myself a PB&J in my blanket fort, and never come out again. That's fine. That's totally fine. But I digress. And he goes on and he says, but when you are invited, take the lowest place so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. For achievers and doers and those who are, see themselves as self-made, this is really humbling, because sure, there's a lot to be said for grit and hard work and maybe a little bit of luck, but ultimately it's God who honors, and not you and not me. But he continues in verse 12, he said, then Jesus said to his host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Imagine saying this to the religious leader who has invited you into his home for dinner. Hey, listen, there are people here who, or people who are not here, who should be here, and I'm not sure why you didn't invite them, but let's talk about it. But I'm sure the guy was like, no, thank you, pass. But that's because Jesus' table isn't about reciprocity. It's not about class or status. He was creating a new kind of countercultural society in the midst of everything that they have ever known, this huge empire. He wanted to close the gap or eliminate altogether this distance between the rich and the poor, between those on the inside and those who thought they were on the out, right? And as you can imagine, the people that he's talking to are like, but why? This has worked totally fine for us for so many years. This system that benefits me, it's good. Let's not. But let me ask you this. What if we did kind of an audit of our church in the light of what Jesus is saying here? Like, how many things do we do that offer some kind of reciprocity, right? Is our student ministry a place that to reach lost students, or is it just a safe haven for church kids? Are our table groups inviting new people in or going out into their neighborhoods, or are they cozy, kind of comfy social clubs? Now, I'm not knocking either of those things. I think group life is literally the best life. It's part of my job, right? I love it. And my student just got back from camp and is going to Kings Island on Tuesday with the student group. So I think both of those things are so important. But are we welcoming and inviting new people? Are we pleasant to the barista who may get our name wrong at the coffee shop that we go to every morning? Do we treat the janitor at our organization the same as we treat the CEO? Jesus was flipping their idea upside down. Everything that they were used to or that they were familiar with about the table, he's saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. That the table should be a place of healing and of love, and it's not about exclusion, but it's about inclusion. That it's a place to welcome people who could never pay you back. He's saying that these are the people who should be invited to your table and to my table. He's not telling us to take the lowest place for the sake of others. He's asking us to leverage our place for the sake of others. He didn't invite us to the table so that we could feast and leave other people out. He invited us so we could invite the whole world in to what he's doing. Now, as we prepare to move to verse 15, you're going to meet a guy who we have all been at the meal, and don't pretend it hasn't been you because we know it has. It says, when one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." And it's one of those where it feels like, tell me you're trying to break the silence without telling me, because I just imagine this guy is like, "Blessed is the one," and everybody's just like, staring, but you've been there and I've been there. The room gets really quiet and it gets awkwardly silent, and you're like, so this internet thing's here to stay, right? Like, that's what I feel like this guy is doing. It's like everything got silent, got really awkward, and he's trying to figure out how to break the silence. But poor buddy. Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests." Jesus is like, well, that teaching that I just did, clearly lost on all of you, right? Didn't connect, so I'm going to have to try something else. So he is about to tell them a parable. Now, a parable is not something that actually happened. It's something that they're familiar with, a concept they're familiar with that attaches a new teaching to it, and so that way they can understand what he's trying to say. So, Jesus is like, buckle in. We're about to go a different way here. So, he starts by setting up the idea that there's going to be a big party, and he's invited many guests. But spoiler alert, this great banquet that he's talking about, it's his kingdom, okay? So just keep that in mind as we're going along. But God loves a big party. And if you think, okay, sure. But the Bible speaks about food, parties, banquets, more than 1,000 times. And I mean, it's kind of an obsession. I'm here for it. It's fine. But I don't know what you think when you think about his kingdom or heaven. A lot of times people talk to us and they have these images that it's kind of like this, I don't know, boring place where we're going to sing lots of songs. It's just an ongoing church service, and the songs probably aren't even going to be in the style that you like. Or maybe you picture, people just floating around on clouds and we're all playing harps or something like that. And I don't know how we got all of these images for heaven, but that's okay. Whatever it looks like for you, it's fine. But God wants this kingdom, his heaven, to be a big party. And he's already sent the invites, you guys. You've already been invited. Spoiler alert, okay? But he's already invited, and he's paid for everything. You don't owe anything. None of these people had to pay for anything. You're already invited. He's paid for everything. But let's see how Jesus explains it in this parable. In verse 17, it starts by saying, "At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I have just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" Now that's a lot, okay? But back in those ancient times, there were 2 invites when a party was going to happen. And the first one was kind of a save the date that we're more familiar with now, right? Because in verse 16 it said that the man was going to host a banquet and had invited many guests. But you couldn't typically set an exact date for a party back in those days because you had to go catch the fish. You had to go slaughter goats, right? You didn't know, or you had no refrigeration. You had no electricity. You couldn't go buy stuff and prep it ahead of time. You had to wait until all of those things were ready before you could have your actual party. So then if you had RSVP'd to the first invite, when they were ready, you'd get this second invite that they talked about in verse 17, when he sends a servant to tell those who had been invited that everything was ready. This one was more personal, more urgent, right? This one is saying everything is ready and we can't keep it for long, so pack up the donkey and let's go. The party is now. But as his servant does that, the guests all started to make excuses, right? So take the first guy, for example. He says, "I've just bought a field and I must go see it. Please excuse me." First of all, who buys property without seeing it? In this economy, I suppose it's dirt, right? It's a plot of land, so maybe that would be okay. There's not a lot to look at, but also it's dirt. So it couldn't wait until after this great banquet, this party, for you to go look at it. But then there was the second guy who says, "I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me." For real? This doesn't make sense either. It reminds me actually of the show Storage Wars that I used to watch years and years ago. They used to open up the storage locker. They could only see what was right in front of them. And then these people would bid absurd amounts of money for this locker. And it may have nothing in it, right? We didn't even know. But that's what this guy did. He bought these 10 oxen, because a yoke has 2 oxen, if you're not familiar with a yoke, but 10 oxen. So this guy is clearly wealthy, right? So if you have enough money to buy 10 oxen, sight unseen, you probably have somebody working for you that could go check out those oxen, so that way you could attend this great banquet. But then there was another rejection. The guy says, I just got married, so I can't come. Right, because back then, the last thing that your new wife would definitely want to do is go to a free party and feast. That would just be absolutely terrible. But I do appreciate him because he doesn't bust out the niceness, like he's not Midwest nice. He's just like, yeah, not going to be there. Thanks though. But we've got three pretty lame kind of excuses, right? But let's look at them in a different way. What if the field of the first guy kind of represents our current responsibilities or those future opportunities? That this holds so many people back from taking that next step in their faith journey because we're overwhelmed and we don't have the mental capacity or the heart to kind of look at the future because we're just so overwhelmed with our present situation that we can't stop to think about our spiritual condition or eternity. But then the second man with the oxen kind of represents our possessions and our responsibilities and maybe our careers, because the material things, because the more you have, the more responsibilities you have. But also the more you have to lose too. And so many people are consumed with this accumulation of stuff that they just don't have the time to stop and think about eternity. Then the third guy, who, again, I think he's my favorite because he just doesn't bust out the politeness, which I appreciate sometimes, but he just says he can't come. But sometimes people will use these romantic relationships as an excuse for why they aren't taking their next step in their faith journey. Or they blame their season of life, like, when I have this, then I can XYZ. Or when I get married, I'll XYZ. Or when I have kids, because I want them to have a relationship with Jesus, then I'll X, Y, Z. But we have all of these excuses, but we still have no guests, right, at our party. So what do? They said in that parable, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. So two kind of crazy things have happened so far in this parable. One, the second invitation ignored. And two, the host wants to fill up his house with outcasts instead. So this is just flipping the whole script. This is wild to them as they are hearing this. But the great banquet, this banquet is about the honor and respect of the host. And now the host feels dishonored and angry, obviously, right? Like you would feel the same too. You had all these people who RSVP'd and now they're like, just kidding, not going to be there. So he sends his servant to go find the people who are spiritually needy, the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame, who wouldn't have been seen as unworthy, but maybe religiously unclean. And Jesus is rejecting both this social and religious conventions that everybody is used to. He's not even saying invite the worthy poor, right? He's like the unworthy, the irreligious, the sinful. Like those are the people I want you to go find and bring to my party. And I love this so much because it's not our job as Christians to kind of play on the JV Holy Spirit team, right? Or when we're going out and telling people about our faith and what God has done for us, we're not kind of creating this spiritual interest in them. That's not our job, right? Our job is to look at where God is already at work and see how I can join him there. That's our job. Where are the people in my life who are already asking me questions, maybe about my church or about my job because I work at the church, or, how can I draw them closer to him? Maybe they're going through a time of suffering or shame or divorce or addiction, whatever it might be. Oftentimes, he sends us to those people in those circumstances with an invitation. Now, we don't always knock it out of the park, right? We don't always get it right. In hindsight, we're like, oh, I should have invited them. Oh, that was my move, and I didn't do it. Or maybe you're like me and you invite people and they're like, I shouldn't come because then, lightning's going to strike and the building will catch on fire and, all these things. Like, I'm just trying to do you a favor. And I'm like, we rent here. So now for the next 2 weeks, like, now's your time to come before we move over to that other building that we're going to own. Like, they still don't come, but it's fine, right? But he goes on and he says, what you ordered has been done, but there is still room. Then the master told his servant, go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. In Jewish culture, these were the ultimate outcasts. They weren't in the city. You're talking like what we would think about as like boondocks, right? Okay, these are the people that he's going to get at this point. But he wants everyone to be a part of his kingdom. He wants this party to be a rager, right? He's saying, go where you think that wherever they will come from. This is the upside down picture of the kingdom that I get so excited about, because people who thought they were out, they're in. You guys, and if you've ever thought that you were out, you're in. And that should be such exciting news for you. Pastor Ian Simpkins said it like this. He said, God is going to let into heaven people we won't even let into our homes. And if that doesn't punch you in the face, like, you're not listening, because this is wild, right? And, maybe you wouldn't say you hate people, but maybe you just lack some affinity for people who don't act like you, think like you, believe like you, vote like you, whatever it might be. But you're probably not going to like heaven if that's the case, because those people, they're going to be there. They're going to be there with you, okay? And so this is a now kind of getting over ourselves kind of a thing, because the gospel is scandalous, you guys, and I love that so much, because people outside of the city, these people who are getting invites, they would have never expected an invitation. They probably would have rejected, honestly, because they would have probably been like, is this a setup? Like, am I about to get punked? Is that show still a thing? I don't even know. But they're probably like, this is not a thing. Like, why are you inviting us? But the chapter ends with kind of a plot twist, because Jesus inserts himself to the end of the parable when he says, I tell you, not one of those people who were invited will get a taste of my banquet, which is harsh. Gives you a little ouchie here, because Jesus isn't holding back. He's angry because he is not a fan of people who exclude his people. These other people, he is not a fan of people who treat people poorly, who exclude people. So he is no longer pulling any punches with them. Now, something else I want to make sure that we notice is that up until this point, the you has been singular, but now it's plural, because he is talking to all of them. He is letting the whole room know you're missing it, right? Not just you or you specifically. He's talking to the whole room. But they are so sure of themselves and their seats at the table that they're missing the whole point. So the Pharisees overlooked the needy because they were unaware of their own need, right? They couldn't look in the mirror long enough to see that they were also spiritually needy. They were missing it. They'll miss the whole invitation. And I don't want us to miss the invitation or for you to miss the invitation either. But this was also for the many people in the nation of Israel who had been saying, yes, we're waiting on a Messiah. We want the Messiah. And then the Messiah comes and they have all these reasons why they can't follow this radical Jesus, because they were too preoccupied. But it's also for us, right? Have we accepted that first invitation when we say, yes, I believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus and I want to follow him with my whole life, but then we reject kind of that second invitation of going and telling people about him, inviting them to join with us in what he's doing in our life, because it's easier to simply play church on a Sunday morning and, mark it off your to-do list, get seen by some people and say, yeah, we did that thing, right? I don't want that to be us, you guys. Their list of excuses weren't evil, and I don't think that ours are either, right? They didn't say that they couldn't come because they needed to go rob a bank, or sorry, I can't be there because I have to set off fireworks every night from now until the 4th of July. Well, if you're in my neighborhood, you know. But I don't think our list of excuses are evil. Jesus is simply saying the party is happening with or without you. You're invited, and I want you to be there so bad. So what now, right? I don't want you to leave this morning thinking that you're any kind of like trash Jesus follower or something like that. This isn't a lecture on what a terrible human being you are or what I am, but it is a challenge for myself included. I am not just talking to you, because we receive grace so we can extend it, right? We don't receive it so we can hoard as much as we possibly can so that way we think we have enough to make it into heaven or to be at this party. Our tables are an extension of his grace. Like Jesus, though, we should drive our guest list to look a little differently, to invite people who could never do anything for us. Because if Jesus only invited people who could do something for him or pay him back, you guys, his table would be empty and we wouldn't be at it. So that'll hurt you a little bit, okay? And I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but it's true because I want you guys to be at this party as well. So practically speaking, how can we take the idea of extending this grace into our Monday through Saturday, not just our Sunday mornings, but all week? First, I would encourage you to invite. That's the first one. And you might be thinking, immediately no. Immediately no. I'm going to get rejected. They'll probably ghost me. And you might be right, because some of you know how many times I've stood on this stage, done what Abby did this morning, invite new people to fill out a connection card or text in. And you know, sometimes they do. I'm sure you guys are probably like, oh, nobody ever does that. Sometimes they do, okay? But then what happens is I will text them and, ask them if they have any questions, and then crickets. They will ghost me. So I never hear another word from so many people, and I'm not even going to tell you how many people that is because I'm not trying to hurt my own feelings this morning, but it's a lot. You guys, your first invite might get met with a no. It might get met with nothing. Or, might get like the recently married guy in there. He's just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that, and that's okay. And your first invite doesn't even need to be to church. Okay? And that's okay too for me to say up here from this stage. Invite them to coffee. Invite them to go do something else. It doesn't have to be to come here, because sometimes this building can seem scary for people, and I get that. I appreciate that. But maybe it's meeting in the park so their kids can play and you guys can chat. Maybe it's meeting up for Mexican food, because that literally bonds us all, right? But someone extended you grace once, or someone invited you once, or maybe multiple times. Maybe you're that person that ghosted the first few times and then eventually said yes. But no matter how many times, now you're here, right? And the more we understand how much grace has been shown to us, the more we can extend it to other people. So let me ask you this. Who do you know that is close to you but far from God? Those are the people that you should be making the invite to. But then let's talk about kind of the people that you should be inviting. Yes, I definitely want you to look at your close friends and family, maybe your close coworkers that you can invite and come alongside. But I also want you to think wider, right? Let's look at this like Jesus looked at this. Who are people who aren't already like you, who would probably make it a little bit uncomfy for you to make that ask? Let's invite those people who get us out of our comfort zone, who challenge us, who may think that you would never invite them to something or people who you would think would never step foot inside of a church. Those are the people that we should be asking, because what could this room look like? What could the kingdom look like if we were bent more toward inviting the outcasts, the marginalized, those people who could never get a seat at the table without your invitation? The next way that I think we can do this is to join. And I'm sure you're thinking, oh, great. She's about to suggest that I join a table group at the church. And you're right. I can predict the script of TV shows too. That's fine. But here's what you're not expecting, okay? When someone outside of the church invites you to go do something, stop saying no, okay? And I'm talking to myself here too, because this is scary, and I'm an introvert. There is no place else I would rather be than at my home, okay? But you know that it's scary for you to say yes, but it's also scary for them perhaps to even make that first ask, to invite you, because they thought you'd probably say no too, right? So have your posture be bent towards saying yes instead. Years ago, my friend Jackie asked me to go to a winery with her, and I didn't even like wine, but I liked Jackie, and so I was like, sure, I'll go, and then I literally spit out every drink that she gave me because the kind of wine she likes literally tasted like vinegar in my mouth. But we've moved on since then, but I liked her enough to say yes, and there have been many times that people have invited me to do things, and I without fail will say, well, I'll try anything once, but if this is terrible, never again. And most of the time that, if you're a woman, I think this probably happens more often than not, but it was, it's always been like fitness classes. Come join me at this class. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. But that never happens with like coffee dates. I'm always like, yes, we will go on 18 coffee dates, but I'll give you one fitness class and then I'm out. But joining isn't just about being a part of what is going on at the church in this building. It's about people who thought enough of you to ask you to go to a Jackrabbits game or a movie or to a concert of an artist that maybe you've only heard one song of. One way we do live this out at Bridgeway, though, are through our table groups. And if you're not in one, when we relaunch them in the fall, that will be your time to join a group. And you might be thinking, I'm not really the joining type. I hear that all the time, right? And I get that, because like I said, I'm an introvert. And if you think that there's ever been a room that I have walked into or a group that I have stumbled upon and I thought, I fit in here, you're wrong, because I just always assume that I am the weirdest person in the room. But are you hesitant to join maybe for a different reason? Maybe deep down you think you're too good to join a group. Maybe the people in your group are kind of below you and your pride is holding you back from joining a group. Are you hesitant to join maybe because you don't think you're worthy of making new friends and having community and you don't want to embarrass yourself? You guys, God invited the poor and the broken and the outcast, and that's all of us, every single person. So if you think that there is going to be a person in your group that's better than you, you're wrong. And if you think that you are unworthy of being in a group and having community, please hear me when I say you are also wrong. Because until groups kick off again, though, we want you to join us at the building, like Abby talked about. There's going to be serving projects. There's going to be lots of different things. There's Bridgeway softball games. You can come cheer in the stands. There's just lots of ways for you to get involved. This is not a season for us to kind of just take a break and be like, well, they're not doing services in the way that I would like, so I'm out. No, lean into this, because this is going to be such a cool time for us all to get to know each other better, to get our hands dirty, to do this work together. But if you are looking for community and you're looking for someone to just join up with, maybe at coffee or whatever it might be, go to a movie together, but you don't know who to ask, you don't know who has similar interests, will you ask me? Please, I would love this so much. And this is not like a swipe left or right kind of a thing. This is like I know people, and probably more people than you that go here, and that's okay because I know the people at the 11:30. You're never going to see them. Never. You're never going to know them. But I do, and I would love to connect you. And it might feel weird. It might seem kind of blind date-ish, but there's no obligations. It's two people who want to get together, who both want community, and who have similar interests, and I would love that so very much. So if that's you, let me know, okay? I will make that first step for you. But as we head into this new season, this exciting season of the church, I just want to kind of leave you with this and ask you this question. Do we want to be people who make excuses or who work toward bringing the up there, this kingdom, this raging party that we've all been invited to, down to earth right now by inviting our friends and our family and our coworkers and everybody, the outcasts, the marginalized, the people on the outs who could never do anything for us, who never think they're going to get invited in to this party, to join us at the table?